biggest architectural gem, and I'd argue that we're almost at a nationally significant intersection up here. If anybody knows the history of the 4 buildings at this corner, including the Renwick Courthouse, this particular location has its own. It's certainly significant to the state's history, and even to the country, given the things that have happened around the Civil War. But yeah, the Renwick Courthouse here, which a lot of people know, they just started working on it for the city. So we're pleased to see this tower stabilization project get kicked off. But I know others who have been following along with the Renwick lately are aware that HFI did a lecture series in 2019 and has continued to promote the national significance of this building.
You said something to me a few minutes ago that I had never thought of. What other building is known by the architect?
Yeah.
The Renwick Building.
That's right. We normally call everything else by like the person who had it built for them, or some use that gets associated. It's very rare that you actually call a building. I don't know if we have the Jefferson Building. I mean, you have the Jefferson Hotel, it's named after him, but few of the architects' names really stick like it did here. But there's good reason for that. James Renwick was actually, who was he? He was born in 1818. He was born to an elite New York City family, and he followed in his father's footsteps, going to college. His father was a professor, but also a builder and an engineer at Columbia University, and he actually went to Columbia as well and graduated early. So he was 17 years old when he graduated from there, and he certainly was wealthy enough and to be aware of the up-and-coming trends. He got advanced degrees and spent some time over in Europe for a while, and at that point in time, there was the great new Gothic revival movement was getting started. You could think about how art and architecture and literature and all of these things kind of overflowed together. Gothic revival really started in the early 19th century in England, and then we have people like Edgar Allan Poe writing about it, and we have some architects that are trained designers that came over and started working and executing the Gothic revival style. One of those early people is James Renwick Jr. So he was also joined by Robert Carey Long. He was joined by Richard Upjohn, who also coincidentally provided a design over here for St. George's Church when they had a national competition for who would be awarded that church. James Renwick, something similar. He actually in 1843 did a competition award for himself on the Grace Episcopal Church in New York City, and that's his first big commission, first big Gothic revival structure. But James Renwick was very versed in all of the Gothic revival. So what I tell people to a certain extent is that the generation before was really using Roman, and actually we have an example of Roman classical here in the Presbyterian Church, 1833, built by Thomas Jefferson's builders, actually. So we're going from a classical architecture, and we're talking about what we are as a burgeoning society and what we want to be, and we're identifying, of course, a lot with medieval traditions. These are the things that are getting heightened in this Gothic revival. So he was very aware of different styles. Like Gothic revival is a larger umbrella, just like colonial revival and classic revival are these bigger umbrellas, but there's nuance and details to it. So actually in the HSR, that's the Historic Structures Report, and also in a thesis produced by a Master of Arts student at UVA, Nicholas Janot, in 2014, discussed Renwick's early eclectic career. He was putting together multiple little layers of Gothic, and he's masterfully laying them over top of each other. And so in our Renwick Courthouse, we have elements of Norse architecture, actually, and then late Gothic kind of Lancet revival. We'll pause. And I had the pleasure of actually going to Norway fairly recently, and I got so excited when we landed in Tromsø and I saw that this 1861 Tromsø Cathedral had such similarities shared with ours. It had a hammer beam truss, it had the lancet windows as well, and as I'm flipping through some catalogs, I see magazines and doing puzzles, I see this other really famous cathedral, and I became aware of in Oslo, where essentially a Viking king is buried below it. So it was kind of like a Mecca place, but it too shares incredible characteristics with what we've got going on here. When it was known in Norway to be endangered, and it was a big cultural calling for the country to come together to preserve it. That ended up happening in 1867, but in the early 1800s it was also kind of decaying. But its earlier version had a similar dome, like what on top of our tower does, which I know some people have said, where did that come from? Yeah. So it was really fascinating to be able to connect and pull together these pieces, and then you get kind of a sense of Renwick's eclecticism, like they were saying, are the architectural historians and art historians who say what really sets it apart. But at the time that we commissioned Renwick to come down here, he was working at the Smithsonian. He did the castle there in Smithsonian at that time, and he had published a book in conjunction with a man named Robert Owen. He was a part of the Smithsonian group that was funding the creation of the castle, and he wrote Hints at Architecture and James Renwick Jr. actually supplied the drawings to show how public and civic architecture should be held within Gothic Revival buildings. It was a new idea. Previously, we had put them in Federal era buildings because that was our true cultural basis. We were looking before at architecture precedent set by Greek and Romans because this was what the type of government we wanted, but there was kind of a backlash from the artists and other advanced educated thinkers that said, no, we should really be Anglo-medieval, that this is our heritage, our cultural heritage, and we should be looking to the cathedrals as these master craftsmen examples of work, that they were the height of what we had achieved, and therefore this architecture should guide what we become. And so it's really fascinating. The Gothic Revival it didn't work out for public buildings necessarily, and there aren't that many of them. This is the only one in the state of Virginia. It's also the only courthouse that Renwick ever had built, or at least still standing. A thesis by a student at UVA had highlighted 125 projects to which he could be attributed. Unfortunately, a lot of Renwick's works don't survive because they were in a big metropolis cities that then got redeveloped and destroyed.
Sure.
But also a lot of his paperwork and things like that on his lower price commissions don't survive. The bigger stakes, the Grace's Church, the St. Patrick's, the Smithsonian's, they were all done for very wealthy clients who paid for beautiful drawings and the time that he put into them. But we, of course, even in Little Fredericksburg, we knew we wanted something big to make a splash, but we were kind of hesitant to pay for it. There was actually a tax levied on the residents here in order to afford this great courthouse, and the city council said, well, no more than $14,000. That's all we're going to go for. So this is why it was very important when the building opened. The council immediately declared that this was a public building for everyone, that you should be able to have meetings here from any types of groups, and it was. It was used by all types of groups and organizations here in town, and it certainly became a cultural icon. It would have been groundbreaking in 1852. So yeah, it's really a treasure, and it's really something that that has this like a national level of significance, given that Renwick really didn't do it very often. But yeah, lucky for us, it's still here to remind us how connected Fredericksburg is to the rest of our country, and to the world for that matter.
That's the part of the world when you can point to so many pieces of this that you see, in Europe.
Oh yeah,
this is a special building.
It really is. It really is. And I think like I said, we had Jefferson's architects that worked over here at the Presbyterian Church, and we certainly had Baltimore architects, Robert Carey Long, who got selected for that one. But this part, and even the Revere Bell, actually on the inside connects us even further, right? That Silas Wood was an international business merchant, very wealthy, and when he left town after he had married a Fredericksburg Belle, as it's been said, he left the Revere Bell here for the city. That was as early as 1828. So he's up in Boston and actually collaborated with Revere and Sons Foundry to get one of the last bells that they ever forged underneath that name. And it's here.
And that's why also it's important what happens to this. The people pay attention and get involved, because what happens to this building does matter.
It does indeed. And it's been a part of a community dialogue we've been having since 2007, 2008, whenever we started exploring what are we going to do with our next courthouse. So yes, I think, and it really has stayed, even through the Renwick Working Group, our discussions have tried to focus on keeping this building public, maintaining its public access and its ownership, so that the city really, I think, upholds its obligation and its duty. It's the symbol of government. It's the symbol from 1852 to 2014. This was our civic building, to have pride in, and so I think that it really is something that belongs to the people of Fredericksburg.
And Historic Fredericksburg Foundation has followed this for years now, and it's important, and that it shows the importance of what HFFI does and the need to get behind preservation.
Indeed. Preservation is, as Scott Walker, a former president and now vice president, says, it's not easy, it's not cheap, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It really is. It really instills civic pride. Like I said, it connects us to the past in the present as we save it all for the future to really treasure our cultural inheritance that we have here. And of course, it is part of the complex. We talk about it a lot. So there's the Wallace Library that goes with it, and the jail right behind it. The Wallace Library was another legacy, an inherited gift that came from a man, Casper Wister Wallace, who left, in comparison to the $14,000 that it cost to build the Renwick, Mr. Wallace left $15,000 to the city, $5,000 to build the building, which George Roten did, a local builder, $5,000 for the books, and $5,000 to run and staff that facility. So anyway, it puts it in a little perspective here. But that's also a really great piece of architecture. I will say at that time, there were a lot of Carnegie libraries going around the country, and it was a very nice thing to be able to say your town had this cute, beautiful little fashion library, and I think George Roten did a very good job. He executed it in kind of a classical, that temple front classical style, and it's really another treasured little building that we have here. And along the alleyway is still the jail. The superstructure of the jail dates more recently, between 1927 and opened 1928. But below it is the brick foundation and even stones reused from an earlier jail that you can see on the alleyway as you walk down what's called Hayscales Alley. It's really the heart of the city, and it always has been, frankly. And
so many of us you just drive by and you don't think, but there's some serious history and some serious preservation. Right. And HFI has been really advocating for, again, this national level of significance and evaluation so that we can look at grants. There are Save America's Treasures grants that can go up to $750,000, and I think just taking real pride and articulating what we have here and making the case for it could really help, again, the public hold on to this beautiful building and maybe even restore some of its characteristics that brought it such prominence. I know in the 20s we added what is like this pebble dash stucco on the outside, but it was originally a polychromatic stucco. It was banded and painted to look like stone. And this is funny, actually, because there was a moment Renwick would tailor what he did to clients' needs and cost effectiveness, and that was certainly one way to fake the stone on the outside. But they think maybe it was the first example of polybanding in the country. So another innovative kind of technique that was introduced here, and I think we really have the potential with this building to do a lot to, again, to highlight the significant role that it played in our city and also for our country.